course, we are talking about AI replacing developers, right? I mean, everyone is scared. So, what do you think, like, how this AI is going to change the way developers work, or is it really going to replace me? And
Who is this
yeah,
Devin?
yeah, who is this?
Everyone's getting mad at Devin already.
And you can ask Copilot to submit a pull request to fix that issue or resolve that issue. So yeah, they're certainly also moving in sort of that direction.
Don't you think like this has an added disadvantage? Like if early level developers are using it, it like somehow gives an overhead for the people or the senior developers who are actually doing the code. Of course, AI is like, of course, there are so many tools available. So what do you think how developers can utilize all these AI tools to like become more productive?
So will it replace developers? I think that's like, you hear that question so much. I never think it was like the right question, right? Like it's like, what parts of development, not developers, will it replace? I think that's a better question. The parts of development that it's already replaced for me are boring. Like I don't want to do that stuff. Like I'm happy it's replacing that stuff.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of This is Tech Talks, and this is episode 9, and we are like really happy to have Chris on the show. Hey Chris, thanks for joining.
Hey, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we have our co-host Lars today with us. Hey Lars, how are you?
Hey, my head is full of AI, so it's a good day for this session.
Yeah, I mean, of course, everyone is. What's the name? Which is going viral?
Devin.
Devin.
Okay, yeah, everyone is excited about.
Who is this
Yeah,
Devin?
Yeah.
who is this guy?
Everyone's getting mad at Devin already.
Yeah, and Devin is wondering why.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, good time to actually discuss about the AI stuff because you if you're watching this or if you're listening to the episode, you already know Devin by this time, so it's going viral on Twitter and everywhere. But that's not why we are here, basically. So Chris is, I mean, I've been following Chris for a long time, and yeah, I'm a big fan of the work you do, Chris. So Chris mentioned that okay, he wants like something about AI, and I was like, okay, why not to actually invite him on the podcast? And that's how this episode is happening. So Chris, I mean, before we go ahead, like, right, of course, talking about the AI, would you like to introduce yourself, what you do, and what's where you're working right now? I mean, I know you have a new job now.
Yeah, I do. I have a new job, and so hey everyone, my name is Chris. I have been a coder for I don't know 20 years now. Um, have built and sold a company. Have just been moseying around the coding space, and like I consider myself a full stack developer, design and back end, all that good stuff. And to be in like it's kind of been, things have been progressing normally for the past like maybe 5-10 years, and this is, I think, the one of the few times that it's been like an exciting truly new time. And it's only been like AI has been out for what, a year and change right now. And so yeah, I saw kind of this movement happening, and I said, you know what, let me just go find the center of it. Let me go like join an AI company. So I currently work at Sourcegraph, and they have their coding AI assistant named Cody. And it's been really interesting just being like on the inside of an AI company and seeing it at scale. It's really fun.
So, yeah, I mean, so like to start with, like my first question is when we talk about AI, like what we're talking about. Well, AI is a huge space, right? So, would you like to give a small introduction about AI?
Yeah. And I still don't think I'm qualified enough to give the full introduction to AI, right? But as far as I think the best answer here is, especially for the topics that we have lined up for today, is coding AI, right? And
Mm.
just specific to our industry. Um, and this is interesting. I've never been asked for like an overview of what coding AI is. I guess, I mean, how would you all put it? Just like a a senior developer hanging out with you while you code?
I would say it started in 1950 with Alan Turing releasing a paper called Computing Machinery and Intelligence. And that pretty much predicts what's happening now or starting to happen. That machines can start to perform tasks autonomously or semi-autonomously.
Yeah, I mean, machines have been doing for some time, but I think it's introducing that into like tech where it's like writing code for you. It's something new, right? I mean, of course, there were some code generators and stuff, but that was not AI doing for you. Someone else was
Yeah.
writing the code.
Yeah,
So
I think one of the keys is these large language models that have been pre-trained and some have been open sourced, and you can buy them as a platform, as a service, and whatever. And one of the things that they work well for is code generation, prediction, completion, conversations about code, because there's such a large data set that has been used for training, which is public code on GitHub and other places, right?
yeah, I mean, that makes sense. So, but another question, right? So, of course, we are talking about AI replacing developers, right? I mean, everyone is scared. So, what do you think, like, how this AI is going to change the way developers work, or is it really going to replace me and there will be no more developers in the future? What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, they're definitely trying, but I don't
Okay.
I think it's hard to understand that question. Like, it's such a new space, it's such a new application. Um, so I'm not one to like try to make 5-year predictions, right? But I do think that in my personal practice, right, it's helped me do a lot of the more creative stuff. And I like to say, like, if it's not if it doesn't require creativity, then delegate it, right? Like, get rid of it. And you see a lot of these like hyper productive people on Twitter saying, "Oh, I created a task, I recorded a video, and I delegated it." Um, so that's kind of what we're doing. We're saying, like, I don't want to write a lot of, like, there's only so many times you can create a controller, a model, a view, and spit it out to a view. Uh, that stuff's boring, right? Like, that's fine if that part gets automated for me. Like, yeah, replace that part. That's fine. Um, and
Do
then
you
I don't know,
think, like,
going
I mean,
beyond that.
yeah. But what do you think about the new developers, right? I mean, of course, if you start saying, okay, this thing is something which should not be done by a developer, that means we don't really need like junior developers anymore.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I like to think of it as like, how has things been shifted in the past, right? Like, you talk about serverless technologies, right? Like, before, people had people in house, and some companies still do, but a lot of that kind of gets shifted away from an in-house person. So like, that that role kind of got migrated away from internally. Um, I'm not entirely sure where like a junior developer fits in the mold, or where it's um, yeah, I don't know.
Well, with something like, I don't know Kodi, I haven't tried it, but with something like GitHub Copilot, it works well both for senior and junior and mid-level developers. If I need to learn a new framework or new language, something like Copilot is a great, like, colleague, a virtual
Yeah.
colleague, to have to ask questions about all the things that you could browse the web, could go through Stack Overflow and whatnot, GitHub discussions, but it'll take a lot of time, and you just want a good answer or a decent answer as
Yeah,
fast as
and
possible.
I guess we have to preface that question with, well, like, are we talking about the current state of tools like Copilot, like Cody, or are we talking about Devin in 1 year? Uh, if we're talking about Copilot and Cody, I absolutely agree. There's just like a lot of nuance and context that needs to happen at the organization level, at what the task is,
Mhm.
before you even start coding, right?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So GitHub Copilot Enterprise and something that's coming up called, I don't know if they changed the name, but part of that will be GitHub Copilot workspace is the end-to-end development experience, starting at github.com, creating an issue by any person that can write as sort of a natural language specification. And then you can ask GitHub Copilot, for example, or maybe Devin, to implement that task as code and submit a pull request. And then you can have some, you will probably want someone to review that code. It's not good enough yet that you can just merge it, deploy it to production.
Yeah. Can you imagine the number of like just laid around GitHub issues that have gone dormant that could be helped with something like this? So at Sourcegraph, Cody is essentially very much like a copilot. What we like to pride ourselves on is context. Like there's an LLM, then you feed it like, the current file that you're in. But Cody, we try to say like, let me go look for all the symbols in your repo. Like, let me find all the functions. Anytime you use something, and I'm going to pass all that to the LLM and chat with it. And I've been building an experiment that tries to solve GitHub issues using your repo. And like I'm using pretty simple examples so far, but it's promising and it's good to see.
So is this similar to the, you can say, add workspace in GitHub Copilot chat, which is called an agent, to take your whole code base as the context for your conversation?
Yeah, it is. And so at Sourcegraph, we have been building, it's only been a year and some change since we've built our AI assistant, Cody. But before that, it's a 10-year-old company. We've been doing code search. So a lot of that, like, it actually pairs really well with an AI that needs to find the important parts of your repo, right? So yeah, we like automatically will pull all of the data in your workspace. And then you can so you don't need to at workspace it. You can at specific file name if you need to add it. But the idea is hopefully we're smart enough to find every single piece of code that needs to be thrown in. And then on top of that, and this goes for Copilot as well, right? Like looking at readmes, looking at your, let's say, package.json, finding the certain version that you're using of whatever React, and then going to get those docs. It's really just building this network of context is kind of the next level.
Yeah, that's interesting because that seems to be sort of the way that this Devon AI engineer is is working. He reads the readme of the repo. Okay, so I need to install this package in my OS, and then I run pip or npm install or .NET restore whatever, and then it runs the application and even debugging and searches the web for how to debug a .NET or JavaScript application, and searches for documentation on how to use this library that you're using. So yeah, it's quite interesting that seems to be like the next level of that context is, well, why not just fully automate it then? If the context is there, the machines are even better at using this large context of awareness.
Yeah, it's essentially just what would the next task a normal human what would they do? Go do it, right? And you look at tools like Perplexity and Find, PHIND, and I'm using them for everything. I don't Google anything anymore. I just throw in all of my code or a code file, and I just say, hey, I did one today for Cody and said, hey, this uses a selection. Let me just change it over to a couple clicks. And it handled it beautifully. And I guess that's going back to one of the simpler examples. It's not really pulling in context from web searches. Perplexity pulls YouTube videos now.
I mean, so if I see as per the conversation, right? So if I see good tools like GitHub, Copilot, and Cody, they are more like a supporting developer for you, right? So you are writing your code, but you need to understand the context. You need to understand the language. you need to ask right questions. But when I see something like Devin, it's like replacing the developers, right? I mean, it's you don't have to be there to just write anything. So, I mean, what you think will be the better fit? Which kind of tool will be the better fit in future? Something like Copilot, or yeah, we are going with the Devin.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like Copilot's moving into a Devin type space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that
Um,
was what I was describing. You can submit an issue, and you can ask Copilot to submit a pull request to fix that issue or resolve that issue. So yeah, they're certainly also moving in sort of that direction. But Devon is a bit more interesting in that you can inspect its entire journey through solving a task. Also, it's not fully automated. It will actually have a conversation with you, ask you questions to clarify things before it can resume its work. So yeah, it's not a full-on human replacement. It's sort of a having another teammate, which is also kind of what Copilot is, having a teammate available at all times.
I mean, I'm just wondering, like, if like a tool like Devin, which can just like or do all the stuff which a entry level developer can do, what why we need a developer, and then the CEO of GitHub, of course, he says like Copilot is not going to replace developers. If they are going the same way, then it's contradicting, right? I mean, they're saying, okay, we are not going to replace developers, but they're doing it. What do you think?
I I think it all comes back to like let's imagine a world 10 years from now. It's so soon. Um, that anybody, right? Like if and this is kind of why I joined Sourcegraph is their mission statement is anybody can code. And that's anybody not a developer. And I like have built my entire career on developer education, right? Tutorials, all that stuff. So it resonated with me. So if you think in 10 years, 15 years, like, I don't know, my friend, my cousin, whoever down the street is just like, look, I need a brand new workout app and I need it to do this specific like set of things. And AI just built it. There was still the need to say like, I needed this thing, right? Like there's still necessity is the, you know,
Customization part,
yeah.
basically.
So
Yeah.
so in my mind, if we can get to a world where everybody can become a creator, right? Then that's awesome because like I can create something and then really AI will just create it for me. But where the human part comes in again is like, and AI might do this later, but like the marketing of it or saying like, am I solving my friend's needs with this app that AI built for me? And then let's tweak it, right? So you're getting more to the problem solving and the creativity parts. And I don't know. I think that's a really fun future if like, I don't know, kids are making apps or whatever an app looks like in the future.
Yeah, right now, it seems to be going in the direction of these custom copilots and custom GPTs where you can make extension points or skills or plugins so that people can build applications, AI sort of applications that integrate with your system. This is also what any business could use to sort of automate or maybe make their system more accessible. So maybe you don't need a UI for certain things. Maybe you can just have a chat conversation to perform a task in your system. Maybe my colleagues don't need a developer to write another report or to implement another report or run a script because they can ask the conversational AI to do it because we have added support for API endpoints to search for whatever data they need in whatever time range. So they will have a conversation saying, give me the report on so and so from this customer in this point of time, and then do a pivot table with this other data set. So it's really an enabler for, yeah, also non-technical people, non-developers, to be able to program using a natural language. But currently, you need these plugins or skills or whatever they're called for the different AI systems, so that the AI knows how to reach your system and how to perform actions in your system, but based on basically programming via natural language. And that's the new thing. And that then means now we can program not only with natural language text, but also speech. You can interact via speech, images, videos as well, you're saying, right? And it goes both ways. You can have the AI respond to you in using text to speech, maybe even creating a video, right, on audio, so that people with certain disabilities can also be included in this new world of programming without code.
It's one
Yeah.
positive which I see. Yeah, just go.
Oh yeah, and that's another point, right? Like hyper personalization. If somebody has a disability, it can be catered to like immediately, right? And I think right now with a lot of the technology we have, like education. I have 2 young kids, so I think about education a lot moving forward. Everything's kind of like a blanket statement, like, oh, you're in 6th grade, you're all in 6th grade. Um, AI will be able to customize per student, right? And like maybe bring in context from the home, like, oh, they had a PB&J this morning or something. I don't know, but like a lot of that stuff is like you said, like building in these plugins. I think a lot of what it's describing is like bringing a way for people to bring in their own context, right? And you look at GPT assistants, I'm still not sure how to use them or like how to build a useful one, because and it's been a while since I checked, but like when it first came out, right? Like the context is you just uploaded a spreadsheet and that's what you had. So if you didn't have the spreadsheet and the data there, then you're basically just GPT. So it'll be interesting to see like where all these plugins go.
Yeah, so the I can talk about the Microsoft tooling. There's the Microsoft Copilot Studio, which is the closest you come to no code or low code for custom copilots and integrations into Microsoft Copilot for Microsoft 365 and so on. There's also the Azure AI Studio, which is more developer oriented, more code heavy, but you can actually build an application without code just via the UI there, but you can also export it to Python or JavaScript or .NET using LangChain or Semantic Kernel or the Azure OpenAI SDK. So there's lots of opportunities for whatever you want to do. You can start the prototype here in this Azure AI Studio, export the code and customize it further and deploy it on your own. But you can also have a fully managed AI model and application via especially Copilot Studio, but to a certain extent also this AI Studio. Yeah, they're similar named, all of them, because there's also the Azure OpenAI Studio, which is a more basic version of the Azure AI Studio, the first one before that, and it has a more limited set of AI models available. So, but yeah, you can use that for managing and deploying your AI resources, at least in Azure. That supports all the different or many of the different open source AI pre-trained models, large language models, as well as some proprietary one like Azure Speech and Azure AI Search. So yeah, that's something I'm exploring right now. I'm organizing a hackathon with Microsoft for my employer, so that all of us developers, we have to learn how to make AI applications, starting with basics like how to make a not an assistant, but just basically a chat GPT within our application to ask it to summarize user submitted content or whatever. So that's the first step. But the next step would be to have it automate certain tasks or make data available from our system into the assistant, then it can truly become a virtual assistant or a custom copilot or a custom GPT. So yeah, this is a very interesting space to me. And yeah, I'm in the Microsoft and GitHub side of things, so that's the tools I know. But LangChain is open source, even semantic kernel is open source, but I think it's Azure specific, whereas LangChain supports other vendors than Azure as well.
Pretty soon, you're just going to be like, hey, Devin, do all of the things I just said and integrate it.
Yeah. I mean, it also reminds me of the conversation which we used to have a decade ago. No code is going to replace developers. I mean, literally, people used to tell me, why you're writing code? I mean, in few years, people will be just using no code, and it went nowhere.
If you look back at like literacy and just education there, like there was a long time where not many people could read, right? And a lot of people just couldn't create books. Like creation was held to the 10% less probably, and then reading was even less than that. So then reading went up, and you just look at these things and like whole ecosystems have gone away, like the book printers and all that stuff. I know they're still there, but but then I think people just find ways to be more creative. Like, however many billion people in the world, let's have a billion podcasts, whatever, you know, like, I don't know. That's really fun for me. Like when you see a lot of, I don't know, I have a lot of friends that are doing jobs that they're not liking, and they're just 9 to 5 jobs. Seems like they just go, they do the manual labor type thing, and then they leave, right? Like, so if you talk about, oh, not even AI, just say like a robot's going to take that job. Like I have friends that are bartenders, and there's like bartender robots now. And initially they're like, oh, I lost my job, but they end up finding like really, really fun projects to work on or be more fulfilled. So it is scary right now. Like I don't know how I feel. I'm anxious about it.
Well, in a few generations ago, everyone was working in a factory, basically.
Yes.
Now every one of us is working in front of a computer instead via the internet. Who knows what it looks like in 50 years?
Yeah. Yeah. We were tied to cities even, 15 years ago.
We'll just be managing a team of Devons at that point.
I mean, it brings me to another question. Like when I remember, like when GitHub Copilot came and it said, okay, what it is going to do is it's going to read your open source code and then suggest some code. And people were like, what? Why? I mean, why it is going to read my code? I mean, this is still a concern for like especially enterprises, right? I mean, basically using it in more ethical ways. Do you think this is wrong or this is right? I mean, this is perfectly fine, or what is your thought on that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something dangerous that we should monitor and like be aware of, especially as we are building at this breakneck speed. Like at a trivial, super weird example, like what if you had an AI, like a copilot, that all it wanted to do was like give you Ruby code? I'm like, hey, no, I'm writing Laravel PHP, and it's like, sorry, buddy, you're writing Ruby now. Like that's fundamentally what we're saying about ethical AI. Like if AI starts to have its own training and way it does things, it doesn't work for everyone, right? So yeah, like it's interesting seeing like companies like Anthropic try to build in those guardrails earlier. I think they're doing a great job with a lot of that stuff. I think it's still pretty early. not early, but we're moving so fast that a lot of people are kind of just throwing stuff to the wind.
So you were talking about the enterprise space, Santos, and obviously most enterprises have proprietary code. They don't want anyone to get any benefits from their source code except themselves. So for example, GitHub Copilot, the business and enterprise licenses, you cannot even opt into training further the models, the codex models, and so on behind Copilot. Whereas with the individual license, you are opted into training the data based on your prompts and code by default. You can opt out, but with business and enterprise licenses, it's not even an option to opt in. But of course, they wouldn't be happy if Copilot only knew open source code, because my proprietary enterprise project doesn't look like every open source project out there. So why can you not give me a relevant context for my code? And then the solution, at least from GitHub, is this fine tuning and customization of the model, so that you can have your private enterprise fine tuned model that knows your code base, because it's hosted on GitHub and they have code QL and they have indexing of the code like you have with your system. So that's GitHub's solution to that. You can, for an additional fee, buy finely tuned models for your systems, and or maybe for programming languages that are not really heavily popular in these large language models. So maybe you're using a programming language that isn't often used, or at least not an open source. So you can train Copilot specifically for that based on your own code bases, or directed to sources of code.
Yeah, and on the Sourcegraph side of things, Cody, zero retention for LLMs on like the enterprise side. You retain ownership of inputs, outputs, right? Like no model training. We're even playing with a feature called guardrails, where if Cody and we let you bring your own or choose your own LLM, as far as like GPT-4, Claude, whatever. If any of them suggest code that is under a license that shouldn't be like suggested, I guess, we have those guardrails to say, hey, this code isn't real, like you shouldn't use this stuff, right? And yeah, like all of those things are, I don't want to say like enterprise only tier, right? Or like enterprise only concerns, but that's where they originate from, I guess, the most.
There are some copyleft open source projects that are not too happy with Copilot and other businesses earning money on training on their code, right? And as you say, not using the same or compatible license. And I guess that's one point that's still up for discussion. When is it inspired by, and when is it a substantial straight up copy of original work or intellectual property, whether that's in open source or not? And currently for GitHub, I think that's if the code suggested about 150, 160 characters verbatim matches any open source code, then you have a setting where you can say never even suggest that, or if you're in your IDE, you can say highlight it and navigate to the source repo. Then you can make the decision on, is this license compatible with what I'm doing? How are you dealing with that? It sounded really interesting what you said about how is it aware about the license and whether it's compatible with your system.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure exactly on like the specifics, but as I understand it from it's a pretty new feature. So as I understand it from the DevRel marketing side, it is, hey, we will check against any repos if it matches, and then we'll check the license, and then we'll recommend like big red flag, hey, guardrail enabled. Don't do this.
Yeah, I mean, there are like even open source projects which are not happy copying your code, and this is like GitHub Copilot literally suggesting your code to someone. I mean, yeah, this happened like a few months ago, right? I mean, yeah, that's. I think I have another follow-up question. Yeah, I think that was the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, any other thoughts on like ethical AI in this space of code generation?
I think we covered a lot of the big ones. And I don't know if you all want to get into it today, but if you want to talk about ethical AI and image and video generation, that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, the enterprises are not that happy there either, it seems. Yeah, something springs to mind like Disney, and I know my daughters have been generating fake Disney movies because they think they're cute with different animals, and yeah, it might even generate the Disney logo to make it seem official, right? It's just for funs and giggles, but yeah. It can be exploited, and that's we need some guardrails for something like that. We need to build that into AI, generative AI, pretty easily. Similar to how like any generative AI that can produce content for you needs to have an option for content filtering in general, leaving out unpleasant content, right? And unacceptable content. It should be the same for not infringing intellectual property. But where, there you have to draw the line somewhere, and it's not really clear where that line is of inspired by and straight up plagiarism.
Yeah, that's a good point, because as far as generating like unseemly things, I've never gotten Dolly or whoever to like really make that kind of stuff, right? But if I'm trying to copy, like I was doing Sonic the Hedgehog, and I like tried a bunch of different ways, I eventually got it. So you're right, like the guardrails in place for the adult censored content, like apply them the same way.
Another question on this GitHub Copilot and Cody, right? Of course, they are suggesting code, and it brings advantage. Of course, like your development will be faster, but don't you think like this as an added disadvantage? Like if early level developers are using it, it like somehow gives an overhead for the people or the senior developers who are actually doing the code. And what is your recommendation? How they should proceed about it?
Could you clarify that? Are you saying that the lead engineers and senior engineers?
Yeah, I mean, of course, if everyone start using Copilot and Cody, like of course, junior developers will not care about like what code is. Maybe I'm not saying it will be
I see.
100%. Many times they will just like, okay, this is what's suggested, so let's push it. And now it goes to your senior developer, and you're like, what this code means?
Yeah, I mean, I've done that a couple of times. I did that this morning. Just press tab, hope for the best, and then you go like try the application out, and it works nothing like you wanted. I think, I mean, it's up to every company, right? But I think at that point, you just really have to build in the systems to say like, hey, you shouldn't push stuff up to a review level if it doesn't pass like your own QA level, right? So maybe there needs to be more processes in place for individual junior devs to like do their own QA, or maybe, because that's like another level of, oh, will AI replace us? I haven't really seen too much on the side of QA as far as like looking at something, testing it out, trying it out, and seeing if it works. Like it can write unit tests, that's fine, but it doesn't. I haven't seen. Oh, I guess you said Devin kind of does, but yeah, once it gets to that point, we'll have a different discussion.
So I'm piloting a project right now called Meticulous. It's actually an AI that writes tests and has a dynamic set of tests generated on the fly. It does that by recording live user sessions. So it will record interactions by user in a web app, similar to some other system do. I mean, we're using something called Posthoc that has that capability as well.
Love post.
So that you can replay. There's other services where you can replay user sessions for debugging purposes. This is similar to that, but it'll do that to be able to replay it in a testing context, so that in your CI it's replaying those user interactions first against the main branch, and then then against your feature branch, and then it doesn't write actual tests, but it does visual regression tests. So it does a screenshot and then a snapshot comparison, and then there's a UI for comparing and resolving, triaging the differences. But the main thing is that tests are never static. They are changing all the time based on live user usage in your application. Of course, there's a privacy concern, so maybe you'll only do it to internal users or whatever, or someone can opt into it explicitly. So there's always those concerns you need to deal with. But it's quite interesting because you are not maintaining tests anymore, and the algorithm is smart about selecting the user flows that cover the most amount of your code through logical branches and so on. So it's picking and choosing the user flows that give you the best sort of test coverage, but while still changing the tests every now and then. So it's never a static set of unit tests or something like that. It's always a very dynamic set of tests or user flows that are running and doing the visual regression test on top of that.
That's awesome. There's like
really interesting.
That's like just full stop. That's awesome. Especially like being a little bit more in the AI space, you start to see a bunch of these different applications of AI, and you're like, oh, that's just like a wrapper. That's kind of a wrapper that does a great job at pulling context. There's like very few points where it's like, oh, that feels like magic. Like, or maybe I'm jaded now because I've seen a bunch of stuff, but that's one of them to me. That's like, yeah, you're just a human doing the, I guess, visual testing, which essentially means you're kind of just running through your app, right? Very cool. I'm like looking for pricing on their page.
Yeah, it's like any other cloud-based service. That there is a certain tier, and if you go beyond that, call them for pricing. And we did. So we're sorting it out and seeing how we can get the best return on investment. Because I don't think it'll replace all of our tests, right? But it's a very good additional tool to have, because especially the system I work in is very complex, needs a lot of configuration, and what I do as a developer just doesn't compare to how it's used in the production environment. So I'm struggling to write tests that are realistic because I barely know how to configure the system in a state. It has sort of a CMS and then an end user facing application. So I don't know how to set up all these things. That's my colleagues who do that. So I'm struggling to write proper test cases for the automated end-to-end and unit and integration tests. So this Meticulous will do a much better job at that, since it's actual users and actual user sessions. So it's highly relevant, much more relevant than the tests I'm trying to dream up and do come up with test data for.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm definitely going to look this up after.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just worried about the tool because, of course, business never knows what they want. And if they keep changing the test, I'm not sure what the tool is going to do.
Yeah, so it's a paradigm shift. So you have to think about testing in a different way, because you're right. You cannot be sure that it will always test this critical path. Unless users are always going through this very critical path, then it's highly likely that it'll be part of this dynamic set of tests anyway. Well, it's also the reason I'm saying it'll not replace all fully automated tests. We'll still have very specifically targeted end-to-end tests and so on that go through the highly critical user flows. For example, logging in should always be working. If you're e-commerce, you should always be able to go through the checkout and all of that.
Yeah. And that thing that you just said, I think, is one of the things that AI will have. It's farther away from being replaced, is like where a developer has to do like well, it depends. Like these tests go this way, these tests are in meticulous, these tests are over here. Like a lot of that is not just, oh, let me just write something that works, right? Like it's way more nuanced.
Yeah, it's a testing strategy, which is also a skill that you
Yeah.
need to train. And you need to
Yeah.
know your tools, your system, your teams, and then come up with a good testing strategy that plays on the best of all of those things.
Yeah. And beyond testing, right? Like there's database strategy, there's scaling, CDN, like all that stuff. It's like
Yeah.
AI hasn't stood all that up for me yet.
So,
Yet.
but, so
Famous last words.
Yeah.
yeah. So this brings me to my last question. I mean, so of course, AI is like, of course, there are so many tools available. So what do you think? How developers can utilize all these AI tools to like become more productive? Do you have any tips?
I guess my number one and number two tips, because so many of my things start before I even get into my editor, right? So in my mind, I've found phind.com to be like a very, very good tool as far as asking coding questions. That's like replace Google completely for me. Perplexity has also done decent at coding questions. I think Find does a little bit better. So that's like step one for me, is like my number one tip is start your searches not on Google. Not trying to bash Google or anything. I'm just saying this is more useful. And then second, I think it takes time to build the muscle where you are learning to trust something like a Cody or a Copilot, right? And it does take a little bit more work up front to say, I got to audit this piece of code that just got suggested to me, or like, so I think a good starting point for trying to work with a Cody or a Copilot in your editor is chat, like highlighting some stuff, asking it a question, getting your little sidebar, and just talking through it. Like use it as a rubber duck. I think that's step two. And then step three, just press tab whenever you see an autocomplete and you're good.
Okay, to write that.
I think something that I've found missing, but indications are we're going that direction, is generating an entire project or an entire new feature just based on your language, a text, or a speech description, or maybe it's in an issue in GitHub, and then you release the devs. But yeah, that's a space where they are not that powerful yet, or the user experience is not that streamlined yet. But I think it's in the making, and maybe it's through these Copilot plugins, Microsoft or GitHub Copilot plugins, where there are agents and skills. So maybe that's the key. That and maybe there will be like a marketplace where you can buy them, right, for whatever product you're using, or maybe some are free for the open source tools, or whatever. Maybe someone builds one that's even better but paid. So there could also be an entirely new ecosystem in that space. And maybe that's what will add the capabilities, whatever capabilities you think are missing.
Yeah, I like don't really have too much to say because it's such an up in the air thing, right? Like a marketplace would be amazing, or is it like a one-stop shop where you just go to a website, you click like a bunch of plugins, and then it like spins up your servers, it spins up your code, it like I don't know, does a marketing plan for you. Maybe I'll
Yeah,
work on that.
startup.ai. That's the service
Yeah,
we
yeah.
want to.
Yeah. That's a good way to get Stripe to buy something from you, to get acquired.
I mean, so what is the final conclusion? I just want to hear from both of you. Is AI going to replace developers?
I would be happy with that startup.ai. Then I would stop receiving calls from people. I have this idea for an app. Yeah. Do you also have $1 million? Then I'm in. I mean,
Yeah. Talk to Devin. Yeah,
You
Devin
talk
will
to
charge you for it.
developers are not free. Like even Devons are not free. Takes
Yeah,
time and
just
money
like-
to get something
just
built,
like
just
we-
like a house or any other asset.
Yep. So will it replace developers? I think that's like, you hear that question so much. I never think it was like the right question, right? Like it's like, what parts of development, not developers, will it replace? I think that's a better question. The parts of development that it's already replaced for me are boring. Like I don't want to do that stuff. Like I'm happy it's replacing that stuff. I don't know. We could like fast forward 20 years where you put my quote up on a wall or something and be like, look at this idiot. It did replace developers. I don't know. All I know is I am doing more of what I love because of it, and that's good enough for me.
Well, we did see the same thing with machines coming into factories. Eventually, the factory workers were fully or almost fully replaced. I mean, there are fully automized factories today. Like look at the warehouses for the big ones and so on.
Yeah.
But
Can they
other kind of
design
factories.
themselves?
Yeah. What's happening now is AI is giving us superpowers as developer. I've used GitHub Copilot since early versions, and I cannot go without it. I mean, there was an outage the other day, and felt like all of a sudden having a slow internet connection or having a slow Git repo or whatever. Just something's wrong here. I'm just doesn't feel right today.
Yeah.
Then
I guess
there's
I'm not writing
there's
today.
no
Yeah.
completions.
Yeah.
Copilot chat did work, but the completions were gone. Oh, that's what's missing today, right? I felt slow, and yeah, I've gotten so used to them, and the features of these AI developer tools have become more and more impressive, and I use all of them more and more every day. You mentioned the web search. I use Microsoft Copilot for searching the web, not only for code. I mean, for all kinds of things. I use it for personal purposes. At work, I use it for work purposes, not necessarily coding related. It's just such a good way to get good answers with citations that you can browse to for further details and not having to watch a ton of ads beforehand.
Yeah, or click around ads. Yeah, that's an interesting space too, because all these places that are like aggregating, they're going to grab browsers, they're going to scrape like these websites. Like, I'm very interested to see where Google goes, because that's their cash cow, like ads, right? Like and we're skipping all of it. I don't know what's happening.
I mean, that's what they started doing with websites. They would scrape the content, even put them in these featured
That's true. Yeah.
panels. Website owners were not happy about that either, because they also had ads on their website. So if you can read the content without ever visiting the website, they're also losing money. So yeah, it's the same thing now happening with these AI searches. Circling back to developer tools, I think right now they're giving us superpowers, but it's also to make them better. And at some point, they can replace more and more of our development or code related tasks, like not even just writing the code, but also planning, making the plans, and um, the discussions and the specifications and the tests and the QA. All of this will start to be more and more automated or semi-automated. So there is a future where large parts of what we do today are done to a great extent by AI or similar technologies. So we are digging our own graves, but let's enjoy it while it lasts. I mean, the people working in those automated factories, they have interesting jobs as well. like they are building the factories, they are maintaining all this machinery and craziness going on, infrastructure, um, the data centers that drive the clouds and these AI services. There are also people maintaining them and building them. They also have quite interesting jobs that are highly specialized. So I would bet that beats working in a factory, and I think it's the same for development. We'll look back and say, what
Why
we were
was I
writing
behind a
code
desk?
all day.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean
Why?
that's a lie in itself, right? Even today, but
Yeah.
we'll look back and say why we're doing so much code back then.
So yeah, it means like if you're highly specialized, yeah, you still have a job basically.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, and that's what I think is important today. If you're not embracing these tools, you are behind the curve. Because I have superpowers of my AI assistants. I have
Cool.
from GitHub Copilot or Cody or whatever. I have another power productivity tool for me is Wallaby.js, which is,
Mhm.
I don't know if there's any AI involved, but it's just superpowers for my development workflows, and it's the best feeling ever. So if you're not using those tools, I'm winning. If it's a one-on-one competition, right? So
Yeah.
you need to learn. I mean, you cannot. There's no future without these tools. So you need to learn how to best use them for your work.
And if you extract that a little further, right? Like maybe 10 years ago, like, oh, I write all the code by hand. Like I don't go searching for Stack Overflow. I don't go copy and paste from Stack Overflow. Okay, I am, and it's helping, right? Like, and it's the same. There's another level to it of let me find something else to help me out faster and better.
Before that, plain text editors. Before that, like literally writing by hand and punch cards and whatnot,
Yeah,
magnetic tapes and what do you know? I mean, yeah,
yeah,
it's the technology changes
yeah.
and
I think it
the work
moves.
becomes easier.
Yeah, and it moves the target from the how you did it to what was created and how did
Yep.
it help.
I've always thought about like my work is not writing code. My work is solving issues with software. Doesn't
Yep.
matter if I'm writing the software. I know how to use software to solve problems.
Yep.
I mean, there
Interesting,
are
right?
low code solutions. I'm definitely right now in the more code heavy part of that. Like I like code, I cannot lie, but like you say, some of it is pretty boring.
Yeah.
So any kind of assistance you can get is more than welcome.
Still wondering
But
like what I mean, who will convince Google to stop doing this Google Talk based interviews? It's the
what do
age
you
of
mean?
AI. Like I mean, their interviews is basically you have to write your code in Google Doc, right? I'm sure you are aware of it.
No,
So
I never will apply for Google, so I didn't know.
yeah, they do actually. So you have to like write your code in Google Doc and it compile. So it's not just writing code. So yeah,
So it's
let's
to
try to
remove
convince them.
helpful tools and AI. Is that the purpose, to remove your tools and see what you can do with just your raw
Yes,
code
maybe.
writing skills?
But like it should compile. That's
Hmm.
something, right? I mean, of course, if they just want to test, like if you can write code, that's different. But if they need like, okay, this code, whatever you're writing, should compile. So it's like, of course, 10 years ago when we had just Notepad plus plus and we were writing code and expecting it to run. So that's the same thing.
Well, I started with Notepad, and I have literally written code with pen and paper, so I'm not too worried about that. But I would never do it unless I had to. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Like, why
Yeah.
are we going in that direction?
And the future is we don't even want to type the code. We'll have the AI do it for us, right? Whether we are instructing it. I mean, the accessibility programming tools today are, wow, they're great, and they will become even better. There's some sessions from GitHub Universe about how people with disabilities can code, and these AI
Mm.
tools will make it even easier. I mean, not only for development. There was this company, I think it's actually in Denmark where I am. Be My Eyes, where people could call you, or blind people could call you and turn on their camera and move their phone around and have you describe what they see in their environment. And now the next step is now they have AI doing it for you. So removing the human aspect of that. That's pretty cool. Innovations like that is just going to pop up everywhere in this next decade.
Great. So I think we can just talk about this topic for another 1 hour because we all are developers and we love our jobs, right? So, but yeah, we are almost at the 1 hour session. And okay, so I'll just ask you last question, Chris. I mean, is there anything you want to promote? Generally, we ask our guests to promote something, which is it can be anything basically.
Yeah. I am. I mean, obviously, Cody.dev is where I work. My side project is videotap.com, taking videos like podcasts and using AI to generate all your marketing material. So that's another one. Like a month ago, I would have promoted twinpix.ai. It's like this Dolly game that I made,
Mhm.
but it has bankrupted me on Dolly fees, so I'm not promoting that anymore. And that's it. That's all I got.
Yeah. So in case you want the links, it's in the video description. You can get it from there. And thanks again for joining, Chris. It was an interesting conversation. I mean, AI is, of course, a hot topic, and everyone wants to see where the developer fits in. And I think it's a better feature for everyone. Of course, I was scared about it too, but yeah, when I tried like GitHub Copilot, I was convinced that okay, this is not going to take my job. This is just going to help me to become better developer. And I think at enterprises, of course, we have some concerns. So about yeah, Copilot stealing your code, and especially the enterprises who hires contractors, right? I mean, they work in a separate environment and they can have their own version or their own license of Copilot, which can leak the code. But yeah, I mean, if you want that, like go for the enterprise options. I mean, they are more secure and make sure everyone is using that. But like if you're a developer and you don't have access to any of this, I mean, I would suggest just go ahead and use ChatGPT. I think it's good enough, I would say, in case you just need an assistant where you can just drop your questions and it gives you code. I've tried that as well. So of course, that's a good option. And yeah, that brings us to our closing note. So thanks again for watching the episode, and we'll be back next episode. We will be talking with Next.js team. So we want to know like what Next.js team has been working on. So we will have some of the core team members from Next team talking to us and letting us know what the plan for the future is. And we'll see you soon. And thanks again for all the support. We reached almost 1,000 subscribers as of now on our YouTube channel, and we have more than 10,000 views. Uh, keep giving the support to us, and see you again next week. Bye bye.